excited about our video today because I am going to be talking about my absolute favorite thing when it comes to directing, and that is directing actors' performances and developing blocking. So I'm going to walk you guys through my process for how I prepare to direct a scene. It's going to be a ton of fun, so stick around. What's up, homegrown filmmakers? Welcome back to the channel. Do you remember what the tagline is? What's up, homegrown filmmaker? Welcome back to the channel. My name is Poling Swet, and I am a homegrown filmmaker sharing with you my process as I teach myself and continue to push the learning process forward when it comes to filmmaking. So I would say that when I started directing, the most mystifying part of it for me was directing actors. Like, what do they need from you? What kind of support? How are you supposed to talk to them to support them in their craft? What I've discovered is there's a whole process to prepare for that so that you actually have something that you're drawing from. You're not just trying to come up with actions or words or meaningful things out of nowhere. You're actually drawing from the script, drawing from the characters, and we're gonna go through some of that process right now. So this book is kind of what I'm drawing from. This is The Film Director's Intuition by Judith Weston. She also wrote another book called Directing Actors, which I completely recommend. Totally changed my view on how to speak to actors, how to give them good direction, and what kind of support they need from a director. This book is more about script analysis and getting into the nitty-gritty of the story to really get to know it as the director, so that when you're on set and you're having to make spur-of-the-moment decisions, you're intuitively pulling from a way more informed place. So I asked a few of you guys to send me some scripts for me to analyze, as I thought that would be kind of fun. And I just want to say thank you to everyone who did send a script. It was very helpful, very fun to read some of your writing. So the script I decided to go with is A Slave No More by Caudill. So to kind of set the space, set the mindset for how we're going to go into this, this is a space where we are not making any decisions. This is simply our sandbox to play in, to experiment in, to try out different thoughts. No decisions are being made. And that is vital because working with the actors is collaborative. And so I'm not going to be making any decisions without them. I'm going to be digging in to find really good conversation starters about the characters, about the story, about the arcs, and just really getting a solid ground on this script. So the rule of thumb here is going to be, and this is something that I am definitely pulling from the book that I showed you guys, is that for every choice that we have to make, we are going to come up with 3 different options. And these options do not have to be viable options. They could be totally backwards of how you think it should go, totally stupid, whatever. The point here is to get into the habit of coming up with more options than just the obvious, because that way you can actually be making solid choices. You can throw your preferences and what you think is kind of the right way to go up against other ideas to see how they compare and make sure that it is the right path. This is the script, and first thing I kind of want to do is just run through really briefly what happens. So we have our antagonist character. He's kind of introduced in the first scene. Evil looking sword, black clothes. He's eating a turkey leg, which I thought was an interesting choice. I think this is supposed to have kind of a comedic tone, but we're gonna see how it goes. The next scene is a small encampment here, is what it says. And we have 2 characters. This is Kira and Joshua. Now, they are gonna have a conversation here, and it looks like Joshua saved Kira. She's a slave. They're cutting the cuff off of her wrist, and they're just kind of having a quippy back and forth about how Joshua saved her and he's gonna go fish, and she's kind of teasing him, you think you're gonna be able to find fish. And the scene ends when Joshua takes out a horn and he gives it to her. He says, in case there's trouble, and Kira says, I think I can take care of myself for an hour, and Joshua says there's no shame in asking for help. So the next scene, we're still at the campsite here. Dracus appears, it's just Kira there. Dracus says, you have a new master, and he dares her to call Joshua with the horn. Kira gets really mad, and then Dracus kind of has the upper hand here, but she's angry, and they're gonna go back and forth And then we cut to the riverside, Joshua's fishing, cut back to the encampment. Dracus is giving us some lines to kind of give more information about like what his relationship with Kira is. She gets the horn and she blows it, and then Dracus is about to kill her. He's about to cuff her again, and Joshua comes in. He says, "You can't fight for her forever." And Joshua says, "I think you'll find I can." Joshua is obviously the better warrior here, and Dracus just runs away. He's done. Okay, Joshua helps Kira up, and then they're gonna have a back and forth. I'm gonna dig more into the dialogue. I just kind of want to run through everything that's here. So Kira obviously has this insecurities. "You don't even know me, and if you did, trust me, you wouldn't be saying that I'm worth the trouble." And Joshua says, "I'll always be there for you." And he hands her the horn, "If you'll let me." And then Kira takes the horn. We got a verse at the bottom. So I'm guessing, Megan, that she was kind of pulling from this verse and just exploring what it was about. Okay, so I'm going to kind of start with first impressions. I think Kira here is kind of what's holding the scene together. She's kind of at the root of it. So I'm going to start with her, what I know about her. Kira was a slave. That's kind of what the scene is about. Is she still a slave? Is that still her identity? She's independent. She doesn't want help. She's scared and tired and on the run. One of the things that the book suggests you do is to very actively imagine what came just before this scene. So when we meet Kira, Joshua is breaking off her slave cuffs. So I imagine that they were in a fight. He rescued her. They were on the run. She's tired. She's hungry. And this slave cuff is something that's been with her forever. It's been her life. And so this is a big moment, that coming off and kind of introducing the character that way. Here's where the rule of three comes. That was one option of what could have come just before. Now we have to think of more, which is always a fun exercise for your brain. So I don't think this is what the screenwriter intended at all. I'm just, again, there are no wrong answers here. We're just exploring. But they've been walking for days, and Kira has just been begging him to please take this cuff off of me. I'm done with it. I want it off. So he finally gives in. So that's a completely different relational dynamic that you're coming into the scene with if you were to start from there. So that's option number 2. Option number 3. Again, I could just pull whatever I want out of this. Kira didn't want to be rescued by Joshua, so when he rescued her from Dracus, she just took off running. She was on her own. She'd rather not, and he ended up chasing her down. And now he's like holding on to her so she won't run away. And like, I want to take this cuff off of you, and she's just kind of reluctantly giving into him. Again, I'm not going to make any decisions right now. This is just opening up to ask questions about who is this character? Where is she coming from? What are her goals? Stuff like that. Okay, I think I'm going to leave Kira there. That's kind of just a good place to start with her. Joshua. I don't feel like we get a lot of clues to Joshua. He's kind of the voice of the theme here. Things that I know just right off. He's a warrior. He's a savior. He cares about Kira.
I would say maybe he's lighthearted because of the fishing cutaway.
Oh, yeah. That's a good one. He's lighthearted. He's not broody. Again, visualizing kind of what came before, what are the things that led up to this scene. So, rule of 3, he saw her, he doesn't know her. She obviously doesn't know him, that's referenced in the script. He saw that she was a slave, and he decided to step in and rescue her. They've been running through the woods, maybe through the night. They're tired and hungry, but Joshua has a plan. That's kind of what I imagine before this scene. He really wants to get those cuffs off. Okay, rule of 3, we gotta come up with some more options. Just throwing things out there. Again, I know this, pretty sure this is not the intention of the screenwriter, but Joshua has been hired to save Kira by like her brother or her father or something else. And he just likes coming across as a savior. this benevolent person. And so he doesn't tell her that. He just is like, I am here to rescue you. And her value to him is not as a person in herself. It's as, oh, I'm going to get paid if I get her back safely. Okay, this is twisted. This is sad. But Joshua actually works for Dracus. And Dracus just likes to mess with Kira. And so he devised this whole plan where she gets rescued and she feels like there's hope. And then Dracus catches up to her again and crushes all her hope because he doesn't want her to have hope. This is kind of sad. We can come up with more options too. Like you're not limited to 3. Again, the idea is just to don't go with your first assumption. Play with it, because it's in playing with it that you're going to find the interesting stuff. What do we know about Dracus? He's a bad guy, right? He likes turkey legs. I think that's meant to imply kind of this insatiable devouringness. I love coming up with words that don't exist as I'm trying to explain things. He doesn't believe Kira's worth saving, worth anything. And you know, there could be different reasons for that. Like with all of these things, you could go in and find 3 different ideas, 3 different reasons. We're just not going to do that because we're going to be here forever if we do. And I want to kind of walk you guys through the whole process. But just so you know, that rule of 3 can just keep going. He likes playing with her. That's pretty obvious. He taunts her. He's scared of Joshua. We know that. I know he's supposed to be like an allegory for Satan, and so Satan is just evil, but it doesn't actually really work for a character. We need to get more specific with him. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to kind of discover what the through line of the scene is for each character. And each scene kind of has its own protagonist. Who is driving the scene? That's who the protagonist is for this specific scene. Even if they're the antagonist of the story overall, they're the protagonist for this scene. And you have to kind of look at it that way. Who is driving the scene? What is their objective? The objective is what the through line is. We're going to go through and coming up with different options. Going to decide what the objective of each of the characters is. So we're going to start with Kira again. So Joshua is breaking the cuff off of Kira. Joshua says, if we can get a quick meal in now, we should be able to last long enough to get to the border. And Kira says, you know, it's impossible to find edible fish around here. And Joshua, you're questioning my capabilities after all we've been through? Kira, escaping Dracus's castle and catching non-existent food are 2 very different things. Joshua, well, how about you get a fire going for me just in case I pull off a miracle? Kira says, okay. Joshua takes out a horn and tosses it to her. Here, in case there's trouble. Kira, I think I can take care of myself for an hour. Joshua, there's no shame in asking for help, you know. Kira takes the horn and she starts gathering sticks for a fire. So to find the objective, we're actually going to look very closely at the specific lines of dialogue. And we're looking for clues on what the characters want, what the characters love, what is motivating the characters, which can be what they want, but the motivation can also be different than that. It could be something that they're scared of, or it's a reaction to the other characters, what they're doing, what they want. Kira's first line is, you know, it's impossible to find edible fish around here. This seems like an odd line to me, just because she just had her slaver's cuff broken off. And I imagine that's kind of a big deal, whether she's terrified of it or she's rejoicing inside. And so possible reasons for that line could be she's uncomfortable with emotion, and so she's trying to bring a lot of levity to the scene. She doesn't trust Joshua to share all of her emotions. She doesn't know him. He's kind of a stranger, even though he saved her. You could read it in kind of a condescending way. It was like, you know, it's impossible to find edible fish around here. Like, are you stupid? It's kind of an odd line to say to someone who just saved you, which isn't a bad thing. I would say another possible motivation for that line is she's exerting independence. She's like, I don't like having to depend on you for everything. And so I'm showing you I do have knowledge. I am valuable. I can take I can contribute. I don't rely completely on you. You know, as we talk about the different options for these different lines, they don't all have to meet up with each other. Obviously, it cannot be all of them. You will have to make choices eventually. Okay, well, let's move on to the next line, because we're going to do this with every line in the scene. It's so much fun. Kira's next line, she says, escaping Dracus's castle and catching non-existent food are two very different things. It's not that I'm doubting you exactly. Like, that's kind of my first reading of that line. Escaping Dracus's castle and catching non-existent food are two very different things. They're just going for a really, like, kind of light and quippy character. And you can make that work. You just have to really find the spine of it, you know? Like, why is she being light and quippy? Is it just to be light and quippy? Because that's not a terribly compelling reason to make me like the character. In fact, sometimes it can work against your character where they don't feel like they are actually connecting to the situation and reacting like a human being. There's also a reading of this that's kind of judgy, condescending, where, okay, you think you can do that, but I haven't seen any proof of it. Like, there's a reading of it that's defensive as well. Kira gets really insecure with that, where she's like, oh no, like, did I offend him? And so she's like, well, escaping Dracus's castle and catching non-existent food are two very different things. Like, you can't blame me for being doubtful here. You know, there's also room here for, the script is not set in stone, so there's room here for coming up with alternate lines as well. If you just really like, this isn't clicking for me, this isn't making sense, I'll see what my actors think. Are they having trouble delivering that line? Joshua takes a horn out and tosses to her. He says, here, in case there's trouble. Kira says, I think I can take care of myself for an hour. Here's the independence that's really part of the theme here. There's the scared, timid reading of it that's like, I think I can take care of myself for an hour, trying to reassure him that, yes, I will be okay. You can go get non-existent fish. There's the very independent reading of it. Well, I think I can take care of myself for an hour. Like, you know, that's the reading that I heard first in my head, to be honest. Again, we could look at the scene where she is just kind of overcome with emotion and she's trying not to fall apart in front of him, where she does want him to leave, please. I would like to have a meltdown without you here. So let's get into Joshua. Okay, Joshua breaks off the cuff and he wraps a white bandage over the brand on her hand, and he says, much better. Knowing that he was an allegory for Jesus, the first way that I heard the line was this very loving, calming. He can tell that she's been through a lot, and he's just like, there, much better. Breathe again. Doesn't this make you feel like you're human? Like, that's the intent behind the line. He's just kind of acknowledging that all of that is happening. Much better. A different reading of the line is anger. He's angry at the people that did that to her. Another one could be, if you change the scenario a little bit, like he's putting the bandage around the brand, you could change it to where the bandage is already there. He's opening it up and looking at it, and it's like, oh, much better. It looks healthier than it was. It could be not this deep meaning thing. It's just he's remarking on the situation. We should be able to last long enough to get to the border. And there's kind of this, like, if that was the reading where he's trying to reassure her, she can make it, you can do it, just hang on a little bit longer. He would be intentionally grouping himself in with her to make her feel not alone in that. It's not that you're slowing us down or you won't make it. We will be able to last. I am on your side, kind of creating that connection together is part of that. I mean, it may not have to do with the words themselves, but if you go with this, she doesn't want to be free. She was fighting him. She doesn't want to be dependent on him. She's kind of got this attitude going toward him. Along that same line, it could be feeling defensive against her attitude, where she gives him a look. She's like, where are you going? Like, sort of thing. And he's like, well, if we get a quick meal in now, we should be able to last long enough to get to the border. Like, why are you questioning me? I've thought this through. I know more than you type of attitude. Then we're going to move on to Joshua's next line. Kira says, you know, it's impossible to find edible fish around here. Joshua says, you're questioning my capabilities after all we've been through. Now, with dialogue tags, the little parentheses, I tend to use them as clues rather than like, you should do this. When trying to discover the through line for that character, this is hinting at what the writer was envisioning. Whether or not you end up going with it, you know, it's up to you. It's up to the actors and what's natural for them and how it gets interpreted and all that. I actually have two instincts right off the bat. The first one is he's again trying to enforce this bond. He's saying after all we've been through, he's pointing to their shared experience. Like, we ran away from the bad guys and we escaped from this castle together, is reinforcing that bond. The other one was he's amused at her doubt or her skepticism. He thinks it's kind of funny given that he totally is gonna go find a fish, like where it's impossible to find edible fish. Or she's seen him do these heroic feats and he fought the bad guys and they jumped off the, I don't know how they escaped the castle, but you can imagine a very cool action scene or whatever. And so he's like, this is what you doubt. It's just kind of, he's amused. And this is why I think Joshua is the protagonist of this scene. He's the one kind of, this is what's going to happen next. This is what we should do. He clearly has some objectives. His most obvious one is, I'm just trying to get some food here, okay? And you're questioning me? Kira says, I think I can take care of myself for an hour. Joshua says, there's no shame in asking for help, you know. So that's a little bit more one of those mysterious lines where he's reading the subtext of what she's saying. I don't need you. I don't want to need you, I think is more what it is, because I think in reality she does need help. He can read the line as very, very sincere, where he's trying to give her advice. There's no shame in asking for help, you know. He just wants her to feel at ease. There's also the irritated kind of eye roll version of that line. There's no shame in asking for help, you know. And there's also just the really light reading of it, which might have kind of the same intention of the first version, where it's, there's no shame in asking for help, you know. You know, he does see her need and what she's doing, but he's just lightly commenting on it. So why I think Joshua is driving this scene is because he actually has an objective. And that is to care for her, is one of the first obvious objectives that I would say. He wants her to be comfortable. He wants her to not be overwhelmed. I think that's a very clear version of the objective that you could do. He's really attentive to her. He's just kind of responding off of what she's giving out. All dialogue scenes are this kind of give and response. And Joshua actually knows what he wants and how he's going to react. I think Kira is just kind of acting out of where she's at, which is different.
He might want to get this over with, like he stated in his first line, or one of his early lines, of, we just got to do this to get to the border.
Yeah, like he's hyper-focused on the practicalities and not the emotional thing that's happening here. And like you could do a version where he's not even really paying attention. He's like fixing the tent and then putting the line on the pole and, you know, whatever, and gathering up his stuff. And she's the one kind of going, and he's just kind of, you're questioning my capabilities after all we've been through? Well, how about you get a fire going for me just in case I pull off a miracle? And then he is about to walk out, and then he sees that she's, you know, like what we're getting into here is actually like shaping the scene, the emotional beats, deciding he does this, she responds that way. So he responds that way. So she responds that way. Those are emotional beats. And you use those to shape the scene. So you could decide that there's kind of a turning point for him in talking about those two ideas, where at first he's like, focus on the practicalities. We're gonna get this through, we're gonna make it, keep going, don't let them catch us. And then at some point, like my first instinct is after Kira's line, escaping Dracus's castle and catching non-existent food are two very different things. something in the way that she says that betrays her fear and insecurity. And you could, if you have a really good actress, you could have that be kind of again, that she's trying to play it light, but she is about to fall apart into tears, and at that point he notices. And so we have the motivation that I talked about, where he says, well, how about you get a fire going for me? He sees that she's about to fall apart, and he's just going to put a little task, a little goal in front of her that she has something to focus on, because she's absolutely overwhelmed. Like, that's a really nice shape of that scene, I think. It's also, I think this is meant to be funnier than I'm reading it. So that's a very sincere like story shaping and story arc. If you wanted it to be funny and really keep that lightness, then you would decide not to do that. Okay, so the first scene starts with Dracus. I think that's an interesting choice as a filmmaking. We're not starting with our protagonists. We're just kind of this brooding, dark menace coming for our protagonists, hunting them down. He hacks the grass and weeds away with his large, evil-looking sword. He leans down and studies his set of footprints, and then he hears, a sudden clanging noise comes to his ears. It's Joshua breaking the cuff off of Kira. He takes a giant bite out of the turkey leg, and then we're gonna cut to them. So what happened before this? Who is Kira to him? Is she just a slave, or is she someone who matters to him, someone he has a vendetta against? And that would be my instinct to go for, just because it's more compelling, it's more interesting. In general, that's a good path to walk down. So he seems very angry or frustrated or something. He's like hacking grass and weeds away out of his path. That says something about him. He's not like creeping around and tracking and silent and in tune with nature type of guy. He's just like, I'm hacking my way through this because it's in my way. Like, there's a version where he's just done with this whole thing, and so he walks up and he grabs her and he's dragging her back. But he doesn't do that. He kind of taunts her. He loves the fight. He loves the chase. So maybe there's also a different character where he sent his men off. He's like, I'm gonna chase them down on foot because it's fun. I enjoy the sport of it, and I'm bored. I need something to do. Maybe he doesn't care for Kira. He's just bored. So you have a new master. That can be rectified. What are 3 different readings of that line? 3 different motivations, intentions with that line. Like, has he talked other people out of being rescued before? Like, is this a strategy that has worked for him in the past? He's really good at it. He has pride in his ability to belittle people until they want his provision. I don't know what else to call it. Like, people who adopt the slave mentality need masters, and they end up being grateful for that person in a really weird, twisted way. And so, like, is he good at making people feel that way? And he has a lot of pride in it. Or maybe there's a version where he knows her pretty well. He knows how independent she is. And so he's surprised that she would accept another master, because if she's someone who has been trying to run away forever, is very vocal about how wrong slavery is, or how much she hates being a slave, or hates Dracus for being her master, then it would be very, like, being liberated is her goal, and so it would be very weird for her to just accept another master. And if that's how Dracus views the world, there's masters and then there's slaves, then, there isn't another option for Joshua to be except for another master. I like that interpretation. It's a little bit more in there. So he's surprised because he's surprised that she would take another master. He unclips the chain and shackles. She stares at the shackles. I'm imagining being very terrified. She doesn't want to go back. Her eyes dart to the horn, and he sees her look at the horn, and he notices the decision she's trying to make. So it's not just that she looks at the horn, it's that she's hesitating about taking the horn. So Dracus tells her, go ahead and call him, show Joshua how pathetic you are. So you can read that as the taunt that it is. Again, I have trouble reconciling that with the end where he just runs away pretty much as soon as Joshua shows his fight. I would envision him taunting her the other way. You really need some man to come save you. Like, I thought you were a free person. Can't you liberate yourself? Are you truly free if you cannot be free on your own standing? He's trying to reverse psychology her and manipulate her. There's also one where he's like, that motivation can be happening, but you read it different ways and it's like entirely flippant. Go ahead and call him. Show Joshua how pathetic you are. Like, it's not really all that heavy, or he's not implying a lot of history or things. Like, you can read it both ways.
That it's either a front or it's he actually believes that.
You could read it, he actually believes it, or you could read it two different ways. It's a front. That he's really flippant. It doesn't matter to him, and I would still say that's a front. Or it's this really heavy manipulation, referencing how pathetic he thinks she is and how pathetic he knows she believes herself to be, right? So both of them are a front, but you're reading it different ways. Kira gets mad. They start fighting. She's not very good at it. And Dracus is like, you never fail to amuse me. This is one of those very bad guy wah-ah-ah type of lines. You could read it like if they had a relationship, like he's the that's what he likes about her, is that she's so amusing in her ferocity and her desire to fight and the futility of fighting him. He thinks it's funny, and so it's like he genuinely is amused, and like touches her hair and is like, you never fail to amuse me. I can rely on you to lighten my days, to bring amusement, you know, as because if he truly believes that she belongs to him or belongs with him, however that works. There's also like the sarcastic version. Like, he has had to go through so much work to track her down. He lost his horse, he lost his men, and so it's like this, you never fail to amuse me. Like, just all of the bitterness that he has against her coming out in that line. You could read it, he's just really bitter at her, and there's also trying to convince himself also that this is funny, this is fine, this is what I want. Oh dear. Okay. Once he sees you for the wretch you are, you'll just come crawling back to me like you always do. But that again implies that she has rebelled against him before, but has always come back because she doesn't believe she's worthy of being saved. And so there's a question there. Does she actually not believe she's worthy, or does he just ascribe that to her enough that she believes it? And we're getting some very heavy Satan allegories there, obviously. You could also see this as a revelation to Kira as well. Maybe she believes that Dracus thought she had some worth. Like, he came all this way. He chased after her. She must have some value to him. And so it's this revelation to her when he says this, that no, he values her. He looks at her as worthless. There's nothing there. I humor you. You're just a wretch, and your place is at my feet type of line. There's like a seductive version of this as well, where instead of belittling her and it's useless, you're useless, like that type of thing, it's this, why fight me, Kira? Why? What's the point in all this? I am obviously so much more intelligent and benevolent, and you don't know what you're doing. It's almost like the opposite of Joshua, what we've been talking about with the parental version of Joshua, where kind of like this gently chastising a child sort of way. Why are you fighting me? That's dumb. Don't do that. Why are you fighting me? Save yourself and myself. The effort and the trouble. Just come back. Feints an attack and manages to slice his leg. Dracus growls in pain. So she's fighting him. She does not want to go back. He's not playing anymore. They fight. It's getting real. She gets the horn and she blows the horn calling for Joshua. She barely manages to block him. She gets back to her feet, and he continues to slice at her. Even if he hears you, what makes you think he'll come? You're nothing, a slave without shackles. So that line, I think, would probably be the switch where he starts getting afraid because he knows Joshua's coming. And it seems like he's actually kind of afraid of Joshua. So this is like a last-ditch effort to get her to come away before Joshua gets there. And again, there's something in him that wants her to come willingly. If you're going with the Jesus-Satan allegory, then that's true of us as humans, that it's our choice. And the devil doesn't really have a lot of power over us except for what we give him. And so it is our choice that is the crucial piece that is at stake. It's not about, oh, he could just grab her and run. She has to make the choice to go with him, and he knows that's actually how it works. Even if he hears you, what makes you think he'll come? You're nothing, a slave without shackles. This line, I'm tempted to change it, if I'm honest, because, and this might be purely from a filmmaking tension standpoint, we know that Joshua is nearby. We know that he hears. Dracus bringing up that question, I feel like, discounts everything he says in the line, because we know it's a lie. And Kira knows it's a lie. Like, she knows that Joshua just left. He's just there by the river fishing. You know, so if he wanted to instill some fear of abandonment in Kira, that's what he would say. It's like, he lied to you. He just left. He wanted nothing to do with you. He's nowhere near. He would never hear you call for him, you know. Dracus doesn't know that Joshua is that close. And so he's like, who are you calling? You're just calling out into a void, hoping that someone will hear you. And what is this faith that you've decided to suddenly have? You know, I think one of those ideas would be a little bit more effective. I don't know. I'm struggling with this one, to be honest, to hear it any other way. But yeah, just trying to gaslight her, convince her. At this point, because of how desperate he is, because he knows that Joshua is coming, I don't see a light reading of that line. I did have an idea, though. Dracus is bitter that Joshua wouldn't save him. Even if he hears you, I called out to him and he didn't save me. You know, that's the reading of the line. What makes you think he'll come for you when he wouldn't come for me? Because you're nothing. You know, it's like all of this bitterness behind it. And entitlement. He should have been there for me, even though, you know, whatever. That's a very interesting reading of the line, too. And it might come out sounding the same as the mwahaha version of it, but that would give me more to work with as an actor, I think.
Yeah, that version really reframes, like, everything we know about Dracus, because it's like it shifts him from the Satan allegory that we've mentioned before into a henchman of Satan who potentially made the choice also to be a slave or not. So it kind of hints that he even himself has it as a master somewhere.
Yeah. Or that nobody saved him. He had to claw his way up to the top under his own power without any help from anyone else. And that is what makes him powerful. It's because I did it. And you think you're free. You haven't made yourself free. Okay, he's about to put the cuffs on her. Joshua comes in, slicing Dracus' hand with a beautiful rapier sword. Dracus drops the cuffs and glares at Joshua. They fight. Dracus is now intimidated. He disarms Dracus, and the villain runs away and disappears into the woods. You can see that Dracus is definitely the protagonist of that scene. It's really driving it. His objective is to get Kira to choose him through whatever means necessary, I would say. That's one clear objective. A different version of an objective would be... I like this about coming up with different objectives and kind of different versions of these lines, because it's not, you don't have to pick one. You know, you can kind of mix and match them, same as we did with the other scene, to shape it. That there was this kind of motivation happening, but at some point it flips to the other one, and you actually give your actors places to grow toward and dynamics to shift and move out of, and it's very fun for them. I know for sure it's fun for me. So you could have him kind of cycle through some of these tactics. Like, they're all tactics to him to get what he wants. First, he's intimidating, and then he's like, it doesn't matter to me, and then he's like the seductive come back to me, I will protect you, I am where you belong, why are you fighting me, sort of thing. And then kind of the desperation, like none of it's working on her, and so it kind of comes out more real. Why fight me, Kira, once he sees you for the wretch you are? And you could do that moment where it's a revelation to her that he saw her that way. And it's because he's so frustrated with his tactics aren't working on her that the real motivation and the real him comes out for her to see. And that is what spurs her to blow the horn. She's like, oh, okay, that is not my home. That's not where I belong. I choose Joshua. I think that could be a cool version of the scene. So I hope you guys can see, now that we've kind of gone through several things and we're digging into the dynamics between the characters, like, can you see how much of a better place you can be in to go into rehearsals, to give direction to your actors, to play around with them when you kind of done this investigation before that, where you've really explored a few ideas, you've gotten past some of the obvious things. The next thing that I would do after going through all the scenes, just like we have been kind of breaking down each line, coming up with multiple versions of each line, is going through and coming up with 3 different verbs that I could give my actors for each line. In Judith Weston's other book, Directing Actors, she talks about how the most helpful thing you can kind of do for an actor is to frame all of your adjustments and your desires for their delivery in verbs, and you get them to get their focus off of themselves and what they should be feeling and onto how they are wanting to affect the other people in the scene, or actors find a way to point that at objects, their props, or whatever else if they're in the scene alone. An example of that might be, instead of telling your actor to be angry, which is directing their focus at themselves and how they feel, it's turn it around to be way more specific to the effect that they wish to have on the person. So I want you to intimidate the other person. I want you to make them terrified of you. I want you to terrify them. I want you to shame them. It's like those are different versions of anger, and they're also way more specific, but they give actors a little bit more to hang on to and to work in the scenes, and you're focusing more on the dynamic and the energy between the actors and not so much on each actor feeling a certain way or being in a certain zone or whatever. So Joshua's first line, if we get a quick meal in now, we should be able to last long enough to get to the border. So one verb that I would use for that is to relax. Relax, it's not that he's relaxed, he's trying to get Kira to relax. Another verb would be dismissive, if we're going another direction. I want you to make Kira feel like she's not important. She's at the edge of your attention. Kira says, it's impossible to find edible fish around here. So we've already talked about one verb with that, which is condescend. Let's see if we can do one with one of Dracus's lines. Go ahead and call him. Show Joshua how pathetic you are. We talked about a lot of the intentions that he could have with his lines. Mock is a verb. Honestly, he wants her to cry. So it's this belittling bullying. But bullying isn't a good verb, though. To bully, you don't connect with that as the actor, and maybe you do. Maybe you do have that personal experience, and so that would work for that actor. But I don't think it's a judgmental verb, which is harder to work with. So that's kind of it for a breakdown. You just keep poking at the scenes, poking at the lines, poking at the characters, asking questions, digging deeper. Hopefully you've learned some tips here of how to do that, some roads to go down to really get at the heart of the characters and the heart of the story. I wanted to say a big thank you to Megan for allowing me to use her script as an example and to tear it apart and to dig into it. It was super, super fun. I really enjoyed your writing, Megan. And thank you to everybody else who sent a script in. I actually had a really hard time choosing a script because you guys give me some great options. If you would like to see any more videos from me, the Homegrown Filmmaker, you should hit the subscribe button below. Also, if you could please like and comment, that helps boost the channel and the videos so much. Also, feel free to share this to anyone that you think would be interested in learning about directing. If you would like to join the Homegrown Filmmaker community, you can do that on Facebook. We have a Facebook group where we all just hang out, talk about movies, talk about what we're learning about filmmaking, share our projects, all of that fun stuff. So there's a link in the description below if you want to find that, or you can just go search on Facebook for the Homegrown Filmmakers. Thank you so much for watching. I hope it was as fun and educational for you as it was for me. It certainly was fun to exercise my brain a little bit and dig back into directing.
So we could just go.
Woof woof. Shh, we're trying to film. And a crow. Thank you.